Hello, hello. Think and good shape. See things and you all can see me. Great. Good old mono audio. That'd be great. It is just, hey vid. Okay, sounds good. I'm I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm just here chilling. So you're not gonna be missing anything too crazy. I promise. I have no idea how to fix that. I can find. Oh, there it is. Right in front of me. Okay, great. Now, it should be coming through both speakers for you all, and now it is for me. Great. Hey, Jubby. I only look vaguely monkey-like. You don't have to be rude. I have no plans. I've got the Master System hooked up. Well, I've got pretty much everything hooked up, but I was thinking there's the Master System, I've got the Game Boy Player, the TurboGrafx. Oh, yeah, I didn't even look. I just chose retro because I wasn't necessarily guaranteeing everything would be complete garbage. But how much of Big Bad Gameathon did you get to catch? I was watching some of the VODs today because I only got to see a couple runs live. There's some pretty phenomenal stuff there. Oh, slow down. The lag. Hopefully they get it all on YouTube soon, because right now it's all in Twitch VODs, but it's kind of obnoxious to navigate that way. Because they don't even have it in different VODs, they just have like two huge VODs with chapters, which is better than nothing, but it's still kind of annoying. Yeah, and which event is it? It not the, I think it's Power Up with Pride. Like, hasn't updated their YouTube channel in ages. It's really annoying. Come on. The game is bullying me, and Shayoth isn't even here. So, little bit of backstory. Sega actually, um, really, Sega had 5 consoles that they released. Four of them actually came out here in the US. The very first Sega console. Please don't. The very first Sega console was Japan only, and we can actually talk about that here in a little more detail here in a second. But the Master System, known as the Mark III in Japan, was Sega's first console to come out in the US. And it was designed to compete with the NES. It's an 8-bit system. Nintendo's time frame and Sega's time frame were very different because the Master System flopped hard here in the US. But the Master System came out in 1986, which was 3 years later than the Famicom and 1 year later than the NES. And then the Genesis came out just 3 years later. 2 years later in Japan. But because there was a good bit of time between the NES and the Master System is actually technically superior. Now, the NES obviously has a better library, generally, but the Master Systems isn't one to be too ashamed of, and it actually, well, you can see, it doesn't look too bad. And this one's not even one of the more impressive games on the system, graphics-wise. You may remember, a few years ago, Wonder Boy and Monster World came out on modern platforms that had that gorgeous hand-drawn art style and everything. Well, that's actually a remake of a Master System game. And in fact, even in the remake, you could hit a button and switch back to the Master System graphics. And, you know, they're very, very 8-bit, but they still hold up pretty well, all things considered. Now, the first... so, interestingly, the Genesis is more or less backwards compatible with the Master System. I say more or less, though, because there's... Well, the cartridge slot won't fit physically. Like, the cartridges are just made differently. But the Genesis has pretty much all the hardware necessary to play Master System games. And Sega actually sold an adapter called the Power Base Converter that allowed you to play Master System games on the Genesis. The Master System has its pause and reset buttons on the console itself. So the Power Base Converter also added that in to the Genesis. It's a little obnoxious, though, because then Sega would go on to release the 32X, and you can't have a 32X and a Power Base Converter plugged in at the same time. Actually, the Genesis, in some ways, is the better way to play Master System games here in the US, because since it flopped so hard, they actually released an add-on for the Master System in Japan to give it better audio. But it never released here in the US, even though several of the games released here in the US had the code to take advantage of it. And that hardware is built into the, is built into the Genesis if you play through the Power Base Converter. Or now you can just play with a flash card. But I am opting to play with my good old OG US Master System here with its janky audio, because that's just how I am. The Game Gear, you may remember the Game Gear, which competed directly with the Game Boy Color. It's essentially, hardware-wise, a modified Master System. In fact, several of the games are modified ports. The Master System, however, interestingly enough, yeah, yes it did. The Game Gear, or the Master System, interestingly enough, was a huge success in Europe and Brazil. In fact, it was getting new games into the late 90s in Brazil. And I believe Tectoy, which is a Sega distributor in Brazil, still actually makes new versions of the Master System that you can buy in that market. The video games market in Brazil is really interesting because tariffs on electronics are insanely high. So that means that they play older consoles for far longer than the rest of the world. In fact, Netflix, early when they were switching to focus more on streaming, released only in the Brazil market a version of the Netflix app to run on the PlayStation 2. You could request from Netflix a DVD that contained the Netflix app coded for the PS2 and stream it through the PS2's network adapter. The network adapter was built in on the PS2 Slim, so that was even easier. But doing it that way was a lot cheaper for many Brazilian families who wanted to stream Netflix but couldn't afford a new streaming device or a PS3 or something like that. So, yeah, that market is wild. And that even is true for the Genesis. There are some Brazil-only Genesis games that are just insane. Yeah, this weird Sonic game where the Chaos Emeralds are just there. That's unfortunate for a number of reasons. You could have talked to him about weird Sega games and other things. We won't necessarily say what other things, but... Oh, gotcha. I found a Chaos Emerald. So yeah, there's... oh, and the SG-1000, also known as the Mark III, Sega's first console, only released in Japan, but the the SG-1000 only released in Japan. The Mark III was the Japanese Master System, and the Mark III is actually backwards compatible with it. Which means that the Master System is backwards compatible with it too. Sega never released a way to play those games on the Master System, but thankfully we have nerds who create flashcards, which means that you can now play the entire SG-1000 library on a Master System. And the SG-1000 is also an 8-bit system, but it competed more directly with the Atari 2600. So here in a minute, I'll fire up a couple, an SG-1000 game or two, and show you the gaming glories of, like, 1981. Hold on to your butts, the graphics might blow you away. Oh, come on. Never beaten this game. One day I need to just actually sit and beat it. I'm just goofing off right now. I think this game takes like an hour to beat. timed that wrong. There's some momentum physics with Sonic's move. Okay, that's enough of that. Because you weren't able to give it to the Brazilian guy? Is that what you're telling me? Was that too mean? Probably mean. Oh well. Let's see. What's a good... I can... Well, I can show you Sega Galaga. Why does everybody always want to bonk me? Ah, the SG-1000. Look at it in all its glory. Glory, I say. Glory. Don't you just wish you could have been a gamer in 1981? This is what you could have come home to every day. Dang it. You know, actually, it's interesting that you say that. Because obviously I can't get into the whole thing. But the Master System was the birthplace of a very influential story-driven RPG series. That probably won't surprise you at all if you're familiar with Sega's work. You shall see. Yep, that's the one. You're not on too much of a delay, like 20 seconds maybe. So yeah, this is the starting point of the entire Phantasy Star series on the good old Master System. Base Century 342. Come, don't sniff around six affairs. Learn this lesson well. Hero, what happened? Don't die! Tell us, listen. Six is leading our world to destruction. I tried to discover his plans, but I could not do much myself. Heard of a man with great strength named Odin. Maybe the two of you can stop LASIK. Alice, it's too late for me. Be strong. Yeah. Next level. I will. I will make sure that my brother died not in vain. Watch over and protect me, Nero. Oh yeah, look at them graphics. Them some graphics right there. Oh. Oh, okay. There's a treasure. Of course I want to open it. 50 macetas. I don't know what a maceta is, but I'm assuming it's good. Oh. This was the entire point of this whole area, huh? Cool. All the walkways are surrounded by hedges. You had better not leave the residential area. Who's gonna stop me? This weird conveyor belt thingy. There is an underground passage to the Gothic forest somewhere to the west of Perilet. Going west. Can't go west anymore. I want let me go west. West. Ah well, the game's broken. Let's see. What in the mood for? We could do a little more Master System. Or we could switch gears. Switch gears for a minute. Let's crap. Crap. Okay, cool. Okay. Cool. I'll make that bigger for you. Oh. Fix the sound. That's loud. Okay, let me up that down a little. There we go. Cool. Choose a game. This is the version of Super Mario World that I grew up with. Up that down more. There we go. Yeah. So this is the actual GBA version. I'm playing it on the Game Boy Player. So this isn't emulated at all. Cool. Alright. I am 28. How's the volume, by the way? Loud, soft? I am indeed a senior citizen. Don't rub it in. Dare I ask how old you are? You're probably like 16. College jailbait. Oh. That was anticlimactic. Let's go. Ah, so it's a confession then. I wish I could say I'm usually not this bad at this game, but I'd be lying. I am always this bad at this game. Maybe. You might be one of those Catholic Jewish people. You know, because that's a totally real and not at all made up category. I would imagine so. What was good on the GBA? Sonic Pinball Party. Oh. That's real weird. Press start. I don't remember if it's on here or not, but probably. I'll check here in a second. Ooh, Knight's Table. They do. Which is one reason why I have actually started attending an Episcopal church. Because Episcopalians pretty much steal the Catholic aesthetic, but they get to be real liberal about it. Okay. All locked. Okay, boss leader. Aww. I, I find it interesting. Some Episcopalians will actually fight you if you say that they're Protestant. They're definitely Protestant, but they see themselves as a bridge church because it's the American branch of the Anglican Church of England. I don't know about, you know, that necessarily, but I won't, I won't necessarily say that, you know, I wouldn't put something like that put past the Brits. Aww. Yes, it is. I don't disagree. Oh, well, that was lucky. That wasn't. At least Paul Saver was active. I want to play pinball, more pinball. I haven't played pinball in like 48 hours. Okie dokie. Don't actually know what target I'm going for. Okay. Aw. Only one ball left. Got the loot to do. Aw. Womp womp. Let's see, you wanted... Here we go. There you go. Nice, hot, and refreshing. I don't have any of the Shin Megami Tensei. I've got one of the Fire Emblem translations and Mother 3. Okay, now you're just being crazy. Like, I don't think the world is ready for that. You need to just calm down. Welcome back, Vid. I was playing around with the Master System, and then I decided to come over here and check out the Game Boy Advance library, and I still don't know what to play. Um, you all have any ideas, or do you all want me to switch systems again? I've got the, like I say, the TurboGrafx, or we can switch over to the OG Game Boy and Game Boy Color libraries. That's always fun. Every time I sit down and I'm like, I'm just going to explore one of these libraries, like all that I know about them leaves my brain. Tetris, that's for the that for the Game Boy Color? Because regular Game Boy? Okay. I don't think I have played that one, but let's fire it up. Just play some classic Mahjong. Some good old timeless Mahjong. It's dropping here. Good old Game Boy games and not actually being 4x3. Let's see here. You said Tetris Blast. Blast USA. Oh, hold on. Fix my screen now. There we go. Oh, that's neat. Are you familiar? Oh, that is really loud on my end. How's the volume mix for you all? Okay. Are you familiar with Tetris Battle Gaiden? It's a Super Famicom only game. Okay, I'll drop it first. Okay. It's a Super Famicom only game, but it's dirt cheap to import. It's a really interesting head-to-head head-to-head Tetris game where every character has different abilities. Its strategy is pretty deep. Guess who's playing on easy? Okay. I don't know what I'm doing, by the way. Okay. Feel like I am ill prepared for what is happening. Okay. Dots are bombs. Make rows. 2x2 make a mega bomb. Okay. I appreciate your description. Equal very hurt. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Okay. I'm seeing a little more, I think. Okay, yeah. Dang it. Oh, nice. Okay. This is, you're right. This is a neat twist on the formula. I'm terrible, but it's still pretty interesting. So out of sheer politeness, I try not to get overly political in other people's streams. But since I happen to know that you all and I share political opinions on a number of things, I was going to say I just finished a really excellent book um, called Jesus and John Wayne. And if you've ever been curious about how Christianity, a religion which is supposed to be about peace and compassion and openness and all of that good stuff, could have such a large contingent of support for Trump. That book sort of goes into excellent detail about the the culture of evangelicalism, which is not representative of all of Christianity, but is by far the most familiar and vocal swath of Christianity in the U.S. Even if it actually is now no longer the largest in the U.S. It goes through how that subculture has constantly obsessed, really, over more than like so much of what it has become, so much of the terribleness that it's become is rooted in a constant effort to maintain rather archaic gender roles and simultaneously shift the goalpost constantly about what defines masculinity. Essentially, to create an army of men to fight on the ideology's behalf, It's downright disgusting to read about it, but the book is so well researched, and it really does an excellent job of making sure to point out that this is, a specific Christian subculture, but also goes really way back into the history, back to the start of the movement in the very early 20th centuries. And it talks about how this obsession and fixation with gender roles and masculinity specifically started all the way back in the First World War, largely as a response to more sentimental religious expression that became common in the Renaissance period, or not the Renaissance, but the Industrial Revolution. Dang it. Me being bad. And I find stuff like that really interesting because, as somebody who identifies with so much the way I do, yet still, claims this faith tradition, which has become in many ways synonymous with hatefulness and bigotry in the U.S. I'm kind of fascinated with how this one very vocal subculture came to define so much of what Americans writ large think of when they think of the entirety of global Christianity, even though that's not an accurate perception at all. So in short, religion nerd is religion nerd. Dude, I'm interested to see what you say, but I'm currently Tetrising, so I'll read that in just a second. Me. Yeah. And it was so interesting to see how, well, the culture war was invented to sustain this sort of notion that was born out of the First World War and then perpetuated in the Second World War, and then it really thrived in the constant paranoia that was the Cold War. And so when the Cold War ended, they sort of created this notion of the culture war so as to continue having an enemy to fight throughout the 90s. And then when 9/11 happened, that just exacerbated the whole issue, and they were able to take so many of these culture war issues and then mix that in with Islamophobia and, hyper militant nationalism and that sort of thing. And it, it stopped being about any sort of religious literacy at all, any sort of theological awareness early on, and it became a personality cult more than anything. But the personality cult was about this sort of fictional real American man, kind of stereotype, and that's where the book gets its name, Jesus and John Wayne. Is it sort of talks about how John Wayne in many ways embodied the archetype that evangelicals wanted Jesus to become. And so they set about essentially recreating Jesus in terms of John Wayne, and so if you're interested in such religious discussions, I know many people are not, But if that kind of thing is intriguing to you, especially if you just are interested at all in the question of how and why Donald Trump, uh, that that's kind of like the main question the book was inspired to answer. Because it's a question that a lot of us are kind of asking. Even people within that subculture, um, interestingly enough, were like, you know what? We've let a lot of things slide, but this is too much. Oh yeah. Oh, it's they did not mention Toby Keith, but it's very true. Um, yeah. Uh, yeah. Um, those I very much agree with those critiques of Toby Keith. In fact, his first album, Here I Am. I know I grew up in Tennessee. I know things about country music, so sue me. Uh, but his first album, I believe, was released in the mid '90s, and so was uh, was not able to um, cash in on the hyper patriotism of post 9/11 America. In fact, it's pretty benign, very, it's catchy musically, but subject wise, it's just very, rural American whatever. Um, but yeah, absolutely. When 9/11 happened, um, he very much channeled that sort of, he he very much capitalized on it, which I guess you could argue is, you know, capitalizing on tragedy for profit is possibly the most American thing you could do. Um, but um, he wasn't necessarily the first even to do that, even in such an overt way. I mean, I think of like Lee Greenwood with his, anthem to the U.S. "I'm proud to be an American," which is extremely cringe. Uh, I don't think I'm getting anywhere with this stupid fish. How do you keep avoiding the explosions? But yeah, I actually spoke to speak relatively frequently. Thank goodness. Yeah, right. I mean, these sort of hyper patriotic things seep into the American lexicon, um, without, and it's so interesting because um, pro America propaganda feeds into the lie that Americans, like through some will or anti-communist sentiment or whatever, can't really be propagandized by our very nature. um, yeah, I mean, I remember in uh, public school reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, every day. That was just something you did. I remember I was in high school when I actually like stopped and recognized like what I was saying. Um, and I was like, I don't believe this. Like, I don't, pledge my life and heart and soul to this country. And so from that point forward, I stopped reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and I haven't recited it since. Because, that was one thing that even from a pretty young age I was aware of, was that, America was fallible. Which that's, just that sentiment to some people is anathema. Really? I had exactly the piece I needed and I screw it up. Which, I mean, I guess maybe that, slightly antagonistic bent in my personality is also one reason why I simultaneously still identify as Christian, but also refuse to identify with the tradition franca of the, U.S. cultural zeitgeist. Are you kidding me? It is soft Canadian. Right? Exactly. If there's anybody not immune to propaganda, it is so very much so us. Of course, I actually was kind of, yeah, soft Canadian in that you are really close to the border. And I mean, I feel like Vancouver and Seattle are like kissing cousins. There's a there's a country phrase I should probably remove from my vernacular. His name is Creepa. I don't like it. I don't think I like Creepa. Just that there is interesting conversation happening. I will catch up on that as quickly as I. Come on. There we go. Bubbler, yeah. Devil's beating his wife, yeah. A Sunbow, the devil's beating his wife. Yeah. I love thinking about vernacular and there's especially here, like in Appalachia specifically, not just the South. I mean, there's a lot of things that we get from larger Southern culture, but Appalachia being such a generally isolated cultural identity because of the geography of the region, um, means that we have some very interesting phrases. um, Kidding. Um, and I love pondering those kinds of things. It's really a lot of fun. Because I mean, it's essentially it's another language, really. That's very very hyper specific to the region where I'm from, and it one of the things that um, I discuss pretty frequently with a good friend of mine, and it was part of his studies at the school we went to, is the concept of place identity. And I love that concept, to be rooted to the cultural milieu of a particular place, um, in such a way that it really defines an intrinsic part of who you are. Um, I mean, I guess there's a kind of a scary aspect to that, but I think it's really fascinating. Um, so, it to me, like the fact that, and here I am in, on stream, so um, yeah, exactly. There's actually several when it rains while it's sunny. Um, but yeah, the Devil's Beating His Wife is a very uh, interesting one for sure. Um, but like right now, I can tell cognitively that I am suppressing my natural accent. It's something that I learned to do um, when I was in college, and obviously it still comes through in some ways. But when I'm around people who are also from where I'm from in Appalachia, I have an extremely thick dialectical representation, um, and it's not it's not something I can really choose to turn on and off. It's very at this point it's just become very contextualized, which is a little unfortunate. Because at first, I remember a professor who I had who was an absolute jerk. I came to realize, but at the time I rather respected him. Um, Grew up in the same city that I did, and he talked about, and he would poke fun at my accent and talk about how he had worked to get rid of his accent. Um, and it was something that I was like, well, I need to do that too. I need to, work to dissolve that accent so that I won't get stigmatized in an academic community. Um, I've since, concluded that that's, you know, not the kind of message I want to send about myself or the culture I come from. But it's interesting. you know, and so just my sort of specific personal connections and thought processes and things about how linguistics and dialect and vernacular work. Um, it lives rent free in my brain, I guess you could say. Come on. Why? Not sure how I got by with that one. I'll take it. This not left me in the best spot. Okay. Make this work for me. Maybe. Not gonna be pretty. I think that's it. I think that's it for the home team right there. Yep. You know, you're not the only person to say that they didn't really have a connection to a cultural identity. Even people who grew up pretty much where I did never felt connected to that culture. And it's not like I necessarily felt so indoctrinated by it. It was just sort of the way of life. And I don't know why so many people seem to have not had that. Um, but yeah, it is true that there's so much of the U.S. that just seems to have a culture of nowhere. In fact, I've been to some cities. One that comes out to mind immediately is Richmond, Virginia, that just seems to have this pervasive sense of vanilla, bland, generic American identity without anything particularly um, distinct about it. I think that that's true. I think definitely the whole concept of the suburbs really sort of erodes that sense of cultural identity. Um, but I feel like, you know, specifically where I grew up is very kind of different. There's not, I can't say there's not, but there's much less of a sense of suburban sprawl, and especially when I was growing up, it was far less. You had sort of your central urban centers, which were small enough as it was, and then that gave way immediately to, you know, pasture fields and farmland and that sort of thing. There wasn't sort of this endless spread of single family homes. Multi generational homes were very common, and race relations in this particular part of the country are very different compared to a lot of the surrounding areas, mostly because the culture of the area was primarily defined by poverty, geographic isolation, and poverty. And so much of the cultural concepts that defined a lot of Southern ideology, in the 19th century, didn't resonate as strongly here, um, because there wasn't so much a culture, and I can't, not entirely. I'm generalizing here, but there wasn't so much a culture of, the plantation owner, um, and such, the rich white leader kind of thing, because nobody here was rich. Nobody had the money to sort of exert that kind of authority. Um, and so while certainly you had racial attitudes that today would be seen as abhorrent, while much of the South was practicing the unthinkable, inhumanity of slavery, um, here that was not particularly prevalent. And in fact, the notion that people of color were somehow subhuman didn't didn't stick in the collective consciousness of this region as much as it may have in parts of the deeper South, where you did have that much starker racial dichotomy. Um, I've kind of heard it said that growing up in Southern Appalachia, you couldn't afford to be racist. Everybody was so poor you couldn't afford to be racist. Um, which obviously is not entirely true. Of course, there were still very problematic racial attitudes, and people of color were treated very poorly. But in contrast to both attitudes and experiences experienced in other parts of the South, and also just the stereotype, um, this area was much more racially tolerant than might be expected, because there was a greater sense of shared experience regardless of racial identity, um, which also helped contribute to some of the cultural identity of the area too. There's like music runs deep within this particular area. The Carter family, for instance, the progenitors of country music in the 1930s, um, are from my home county. The studio where they recorded their first album and launched the entire genre is 30 minutes up the road, or the site where it was is 30 minutes up the road. There's now a museum there. Um, the Carter family fold is 20 minutes down the road. I have a friend who talks of going to the Carter family fold as a kid, and they're sitting in the stands would be Johnny Cash, who of course married June Carter Cash, but he also spoke of running into John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin and other famous musicians there who pilgrimage to this area to sort of experience the cultural identity of this place, which is so entrenched in music. It's very interesting. I really need to be stopping streaming too, so you all have probably heard me ramble on enough as it is. But thanks everybody for stopping by. Thanks for catching stream. I know this was very, free form. Nope, you're good. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you all have, well, Vid, you have a good evening. Jubby, you have a good whatever time of day it is for you. Middle of the morning, I guess. And anybody else who happens to hear me, have a good whatever time of day it is for you. I'm not sure when next stream will be. Probably next Monday. Keep an eye on the Discord for 5:15. Okay. Keep an eye on the Discord because I wouldn't mind possibly doing some gaming or something this coming Sunday. We'll see. I think I'm also pretty free on Friday, so we'll have conversations there. But you all have a good whatever it is where you are. Take care, and thank you for stopping.